The silence in the first-class cabin was so thick you could choke on it. Every neck craned, every eye widened. Standing in the aisle, Dr. Vivian Clark adjusted her glasses, her knuckles turning white against the handle of her briefcase. In the seat, clearly marked 1A, her seat, sat a woman sipping champagne who hadn't even bothered to look up. When Vivian politely cleared her throat, the woman flicked her hand dismissively, like she was shooing away a fly. "Service entrance is in the back, honey," she sneered, loud enough for the whole plane to hear. "Don't touch anything on your way out." Vivian didn't blink. She didn't yell. She just smiled, a cold, terrifying smile that would haunt that woman for the rest of her life. "You're sitting in my seat," Vivian whispered, "and you have exactly 30 seconds to realize why that's the biggest mistake of your life." The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of JFK Airport's Terminal 4, blurring the lights of the tarmac into streaks of neon red and white. It was the kind of Tuesday night that felt heavy, the air pressure dropping low enough to make your ears pop before you even stepped onto the jet bridge. Dr. Vivian Clark was exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that settles deep in the marrow of your bones. She had spent the last 48 hours in Tokyo negotiating a merger that the financial press said was impossible, followed by a 14-hour sprint through meetings in San Francisco. Now, finally, she was boarding the flagship vessel of her life's work, Meridian Airways Flight 909, bound for London Heathrow. Vivian wasn't just a passenger. She was the phantom architect behind the curtain, the majority shareholder, and the CEO. But she rarely flew under her title. She preferred to fly as V. Clark, a simple passenger in the system, to audit the service quality without the staff panicking. Tonight, however, she wasn't auditing. She just wanted to sleep. She had specifically reserved Suite 1A, the owner's loft, a seat that was technically not for sale to the general public. It offered maximum privacy, a soundproof divider, and a direct line to the cockpit. She adjusted the collar of her trench coat. She wasn't dressed in a power suit today. She wore a comfortable, oversized cashmere sweater, black leggings and sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. To the untrained eye, she looked like a tired mother or perhaps a student traveling on a budget. To the trained eye, the sweater was Loro Piana, and the sneakers were limited edition. But people like the woman currently sitting in Suite 1A rarely had trained eyes. They only saw what they wanted to see. Vivian stepped onto the plane, nodding to the lead flight attendant, a young man named Leo, who she knew by name, though he didn't recognize her in her casual wear. "Welcome aboard, Miss Clark," Leo said, checking her boarding pass. "Right this way to 1A." "Thank you, Leo," she said softly. She turned left into the exclusive first-class cabin. It was a sanctuary of soft cream leather and walnut wood trim. There were only 8 suites. 7 of them were empty. One was not. In Suite 1A, a woman was sprawled out. She looked to be in her late 40s, wearing a tweed jacket that screamed country club, and enough gold jewelry to set off a metal detector from 3 gates away. She had kicked off her heels, and her stockinged feet were resting on the ottoman. A half-empty glass of pre-departure Krug champagne sat on the console. Vivian paused. She checked her boarding pass. 1A. She took a breath. It was a simple mistake. It happened. Passengers often got confused or decided to upgrade themselves when they saw an empty seat. "Excuse me," Vivian said, her voice polite, modulated. The woman didn't move. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb aggressively swiping. "Excuse me, Mum," Vivian said, slightly louder. The woman sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation of air through her nose. She didn't look up. "If you're looking for the trash, the flight attendant took it already. Just wait for them to come back around." Vivian blinked. The assumption was immediate. Staff. I'm not the cleaning crew, Vivian said, stepping fully into the aisle so she loomed slightly over the suite. You are in my seat. I believe you have the wrong assignment. Finally, the woman looked up. Her eyes were ice blue, framed by heavy mascara. She looked Vivian up and down, her gaze lingering on the sneakers and the messy hair. A smirk curled the corner of her lip. I don't think so, the woman said, her voice dripping with a faux sweet venom. I'm Meredith St. John. My husband is a platinum key holder. I didn't like the seat I was assigned. 1D. It felt claustrophobic. So I moved. There's plenty of empty seats. Go find one in the back. That's not how this works, Vivian said, keeping her temper on a tight leash. This is Suite 1A. It's reserved, specifically. Meredith laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Reserved? By who? You? She gestured vaguely at Vivian's outfit. Honey, let's be real. You were probably upgraded on a buddy pass because your boyfriend works baggage handling. This is a $5,000 suite. I'm actually paying to be on this flight. I have the boarding pass, Vivian said, holding it out. Meredith didn't take it. She swatted Vivian's hand away. The sound of her manicured nails hitting the paper was sharp in the quiet cabin. I don't care about your little ticket, Meredith snapped. I am comfortable. My husband, Robert, specifically told the airline to take care of me. Now, be a good girl and go sit in 1D if you want to stay in this cabin. Or better yet, go back to economy where you clearly belong. You're blocking my light. Vivian stared at her. The sheer entitlement was breathtaking. It was a physical force, pushing against the air in the cabin. I'm asking you one last time, Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave. Move. And I'm telling you, Meredith replied, picking up her champagne and turning her body away, presenting her back to Vivian. To fetch me a refill if you're going to stand there hovering. Otherwise get lost. Vivian stood frozen for a moment, not out of fear, but out of calculation. In business, you never strike until you know the opponent's leverage. Meredith St. John thought her leverage was her husband's status and her skin color. She was about to find out that leverage is a fickle thing. Vivian pressed the call button. Leo, the flight attendant, hurried over immediately. He looked between the two women, sensing the tension radiating off them like heat from a pavement. Is there a problem, Ms. Clark? Leo asked professionally. Yes, Leo, Vivian said, her eyes locked on the back of Meredith's head. This passenger has decided to self-upgrade into my seat. She is refusing to move. Leo's face fell. He turned to Meredith. Ma'am? Ms. St. John? Meredith spun around, her face flushed with sudden anger. Oh, finally. Someone in a uniform. This person, she pointed a jagged finger at Vivian, is harassing me. She's been standing over me, threatening me, trying to steal the seat I'm clearly occupying. I want her removed. Leo looked confused. Ma'am, Miss Clark is assigned to 1A. This is the owner's suite. Even if it were empty, passengers aren't allowed to move here without a specific clearance code. Your seat is 1D. I don't like 1D, Meredith spat. The screen was wobbling. I have rights as a consumer, and frankly, I don't feel safe with her looming over me. She looks like she's snuck on board. Have you checked her bags? God knows what she's carrying in that ratty briefcase. The air in the cabin shifted. The racial profiling wasn't subtle anymore. It was a siren. Vivian's hand tightened on her briefcase. My ratty briefcase contains contracts worth more than your husband's entire portfolio, Mrs. St. John. Meredith stood up. She was tall, but Vivian was taller. How dare you? Meredith hissed. You think because you put on a pair of glasses you can speak to me like that? I know the CEO of this airline. Vivian's eyebrows shot up. Do you now? Yes. We had dinner with him in Aspen last winter. He told Robert that any time we flew, we were to be treated like royalty. If you don't get out of my face, I will make one phone call and have you fired. And him too. She gestured at Leo. Leo looked terrified. He was young, perhaps new. The threat of a CEO's friend getting him fired was a powerful silencer. He looked at Vivian pleadingly. Miss Clark, maybe, look, 1D is open. It's the same seat configuration. Just to avoid a delay? We're about to push back. Vivian looked at Leo. She didn't blame him. He was trying to de-escalate, but appeasement never worked with bullies. It only fed them. No, Leo, Vivian said clearly. I will not sit in 1D. I will sit in the seat I reserved. And this woman is going to learn that lying about knowing the CEO is a dangerous game. Meredith laughed, a harsh, cackling sound. Lying? You think I'm lying? You're nobody. You're a space filler. I bet you used affirmative action just to get a discount on the ticket. The cabin went dead silent. 2 other passengers in the rear of the first-class cabin had lowered their noise-cancelling headphones. A businessman in 2A was recording on his phone. Vivian took a step closer. Careful, Meredith. You're digging a hole you can't climb out of. Get her off this plane, Meredith screamed, her composure cracking into a tantrum. She grabbed her glass of champagne and, in a moment of blind fury, threw the contents forward. It wasn't a direct hit, but the sticky, expensive liquid splashed across the front of Vivian's Loro Piana sweater and spotted her glasses. Leo gasped. Ma'am, that is assault. Meredith looked shocked by her own action for a split second, then doubled down. She came at me. It was self-defense. She looked aggressive. Vivian took off her glasses. She used the hem of her unsoiled sleeve to wipe the lens. She was terrifyingly calm, the kind of calm that happens in the eye of a hurricane before the house gets ripped off the foundation. Leo, Vivian said, her voice devoid of emotion. Call the cockpit. Tell Captain Anderson that we have a code red in the cabin, assault on a passenger, and tell him the passenger is V. Clark. Meredith rolled her eyes. Oh, wow, a code red. Is that what you call it when you lose an argument? Go ahead. Call the captain. I'll tell him exactly what kind of trash he's letting into first class. I'm not calling him to save me, Meredith, Vivian said, putting her glasses back on. I'm calling him to witness your eviction. The plane had not yet left the gate, but the engines were humming, a low vibration shaking the floorboards. The tension in the first-class cabin was sharper than a scalpel. Leo had retreated to the galley and picked up the interphone. He spoke in hushed, frantic tones. Vivian stood in the aisle, dripping with champagne, standing her ground like a statue. Meredith had sat back down, crossing her arms, looking smugly out the window at the rain, convinced she had won the war of attrition. She'll move, Meredith muttered to herself, loud enough to be heard. They always do. 2 minutes later, the heavy cockpit door clicked and swung open. Captain James Anderson stepped out. He was a man of 50, with salt and pepper hair and 4 gold stripes on his shoulder epaulets. He was an ex-Air Force pilot who had flown with Vivian's father before he passed away. He had known Vivian since she was 22 years old. He walked into the first-class cabin with an air of authority that made the air feel thinner. He saw the wet spot on the carpet. He saw the champagne dripping from Vivian's sweater. He saw Meredith St. John checking her reflection in her compact mirror. "What is going on here?" Captain Anderson asked, his voice a deep baritone. Meredith jumped up before Vivian could speak. She put on a mask of fragility instantly. "Oh, Captain. Thank God. This woman," she pointed a trembling finger at Vivian, "is crazy. She attacked me. She tried to physically drag me out of my seat. I had to defend myself. I want her arrested. My husband is Robert St. John. He's a close personal friend of your boss." Captain Anderson frowned. He looked at Meredith, then he looked at Vivian. Vivian didn't say a word. She just looked at James. She gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. James's expression didn't change, but his posture stiffened. He turned his full attention to Meredith. "You say you know the CEO?" James asked. "Yes, we are very close," Meredith lied, emboldened. "If you don't remove this woman, I will have his job and yours." James looked at the passenger manifest Leo handed him. He tapped the paper. "Ma'am, this seat is assigned to Miss Clark." "She stole the ticket," Meredith screeched. "Look at her. Does she look like she can afford a $12,000 ticket? She's a diversity hire or something. Probably a lottery winner." James closed the folder. He took a step toward Meredith. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to gather your belongings." Meredith smirked triumphantly at Vivian. "See? I told you. Pack your bags, sweetie. Bye-bye." "Not her," Captain Anderson said, his voice cutting through Meredith's smugness like a blade. "You." Meredith froze. "Excuse me?" "I need you to gather your belongings and leave this aircraft immediately," Captain Anderson said. "Assaulting a passenger is a federal offense. Refusing a crew member's instruction is a federal offense. You are done flying today." Meredith's face turned a blotchy red. "You can't be serious. You're taking her side? Over mine? Do you know how much money my husband spends with this airline?" "I don't care if your husband bought the plane," Anderson said. "You threw a drink on a passenger. Get your bag." "I am not moving," Meredith screamed. She grabbed the armrests of the seat, her knuckles white. "I am calling Robert. You are all finished. I want the CEO's number right now. I want to speak to him." Vivian finally stepped forward. She reached into her wet pocket and pulled out a black titanium card. It wasn't a credit card. It was an ID badge. She held it up. "You want to speak to the CEO?" Vivian asked quietly. Meredith looked at the badge. It had the Meridian Airways logo. It had Vivian's photo. And under the name, it didn't say staff or manager. It read, Dr. Vivian Clark, President and Chief Executive Officer. The silence that followed was louder than the jet engines outside. Meredith blinked. She looked at the badge. She looked at Vivian. She looked at the captain, who was standing respectfully behind Vivian. "No," Meredith whispered. That's fake." "James," Vivian said, her eyes never leaving Meredith's face. "Mrs. St. John seems to think I'm an imposter. Why don't we call the gate agents and the Port Authority police? I think we need to file a formal report regarding the assault on the CEO of Meridian Airways." "Already on the way, Dr. Clark," James said. Meredith's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like she might faint. You're the CEO?" "I built this airline," Vivian said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Every rivet, every stitch of leather you're sitting on. I designed the routes. I negotiated the fuel contracts. And I personally approved the owner's loft you are currently trespassing in. You didn't have dinner with the CEO in Aspen, Meredith, because I was in Tokyo in December. So, not only are you a liar and a bigot, but you are also currently sitting in the one seat on this planet where you have absolutely zero power." The sound of heavy boots echoed from the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority officers boarded the plane. "Problem, Captain?" one of the officers asked. "Big problem," Vivian said, smoothing her wet sweater. This woman has stolen my seat, assaulted me, and is refusing to deplane. Meredith looked at the police, then back at Vivian. The realization of what was happening finally hit her. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was ruin. "Wait," Meredith stammered, standing up, her hands trembling. "Wait, let's be reasonable. I didn't know. It was a misunderstanding. I thought you were... I didn't mean the drink, it slipped. Please, my husband." "Your husband," Vivian interrupted, "is going to be very disappointed when he finds out why his company's contract with Meridian is about to be audited." Meredith froze. "What?" Vivian smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Robert St. John. St. John Logistics, right? We're currently reviewing a shipping partnership for our cargo division. I think I just decided to go in a different direction." The arrival of the Port Authority officers did not immediately subdue Meredith St. John. If anything, the presence of badges and guns seemed to trigger a primal, cornered animal instinct in her. She wasn't just a wealthy woman being told no. She was a delusion unraveling in real time. Officer Miller, the senior of the two policemen, stepped into the suite. He was a large man, with a face carved from granite and a patience level that was rapidly depleting. "Ma'am, you need to stand up. Now." Meredith gripped the leather armrests of Suite 1A so hard her manicured nails threatened to puncture the material. "I am not going anywhere with you. This is a civil matter. I paid for a ticket on this plane. You can't arrest me for a service dispute." "It stopped being a service dispute when you threw a glass of alcohol on another passenger," Officer Miller said, his hand hovering near his belt. "That is assault. And since we are on an aircraft, it is a federal jurisdiction matter. Stand up, or we will assist you." "She provoked me," Meredith shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Vivian, who was now standing near the galley, dabbing her sweater with a cloth Leo had provided. "Look at her. She's standing there gloating. She tricked me. She didn't say she was the CEO until after." Vivian looked up, her expression mild. "Did you just admit that you treat people differently based on their job titles, Meredith? Because that sounds like a confession to me." "You set me up," Meredith wailed. She turned to the other passengers in the first-class cabin, who were now all standing, phones raised, recording every second of the meltdown. "You see this? She's abusing her power. She's a tyrant. I'm the victim here." The man in 2A, a tech mogul named David, who Vivian recognized vaguely from a Forbes cover, lowered his phone just enough to speak. "Lady, we all heard you call her trash and tell her to use the service entrance. You're not the victim. You're a nightmare. Get off the plane so we can take off." Meredith gasped, betrayed by her own peers. You don't know who I am." "Ma'am, last warning," Officer Miller barked. Meredith didn't move. She crossed her legs and looked away, the picture of petulant defiance. Miller nodded to his partner. In one fluid motion, they moved in. Miller grabbed her left arm. His partner grabbed her right. Meredith let out a scream that sounded like a banshee trapped in a blender. "Get your hands off me! This is assault! Robert! Call Robert!" They hauled her out of the seat. She kicked out, her stockinged foot connecting with the shin of the junior officer. "That's assault on an officer," Miller said grimly. "Turn around." They spun her around and slammed her against the bulkhead of the suite. The click of handcuffs echoed through the silent cabin like a gunshot. Meredith began to sob, huge, ugly, heaving sobs of humiliation. "Please," she whimpered, her fight suddenly draining away as the cold metal locked around her wrists. "Please don't do this. I can't go to jail. I have a gala on Saturday. Please, Dr. Clark. Vivian." "I'm sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll buy you a new sweater." Vivian walked over. She stood inches from Meredith's tear-streaked face. The smell of expensive perfume mixed with the sour scent of fear. "It's not about the sweater, Meredith," Vivian said softly. "It's about the fact that you looked at a black woman in a first-class seat and decided she didn't belong there. You decided I was beneath you. You decided to humiliate me." Vivian leaned in closer. "You wanted to know who I am? I'm the woman who signs the checks that keep your husband's logistics fleet on the road. And you just cost him his biggest client. Enjoy the booking process. I hear the central holding cells are quite drafty this time of year." "Get her off my plane," Vivian ordered the officers. The walk down the aisle was a gauntlet. Because the jet bridge was attached to the second door, the police had to march Meredith through the minicabin and past the long line of economy passengers who were still boarding. As Meredith was dragged past row after row, head bowed, mascara running down her cheeks, hands cuffed behind her back, a silence fell over the boarding passengers. Then, someone from the back, a teenager with headphones around his neck, started a slow clap. It caught on. Within seconds, the entire economy cabin was clapping. A few people booed. Someone yelled, "Bye, Karen!" Meredith squeezed her eyes shut, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her whole. This was the social death she feared more than actual death. Every phone was pointed at her. She knew, with a sinking dread, that by morning she would be the main character of the internet. Back in first class, the air felt instantly lighter. Leo approached Vivian, looking anxious. "Dr. Clark, I am so incredibly sorry. I should have intervened sooner. I didn't realize." "It's okay, Leo," Vivian said, her voice tired but kind. She touched his arm. "You followed protocol. You tried to de-escalate. You did well. But we have a problem." She gestured to Suite 1A. The leather was soaked with champagne. It smelled like a frat house. "I can't sit there," Vivian said. "We can move you to 1D, Leo offered. "Or I can try to clean it." "No," Vivian said. She looked at the empty seat, then at the boarding door where the last of the economy passengers were trickling in. She saw a young woman, heavily pregnant, carrying a crying toddler, struggling with 2 heavy bags. She looked exhausted, apologetic, and overwhelmed as she tried to navigate the narrow aisle toward the back of the plane. Vivian made a decision. "Leo, strip the linens from 1A, put down fresh blankets, cover the spill, make it presentable." "Yes, Ma'am, but where will you sit?" Vivian walked over to the pregnant woman. "Excuse me?" The woman looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry. Am I blocking the way? I'm trying to get to 34B. "Hi, I'm Vivian," she said, smiling warmly. "I have a proposal for you. I have a seat in the back. Well, it's not my seat, but it's available. And you have a seat here in the front that just opened up." The woman looked confused. I don't understand." "I'm swapping with you," Vivian said. "Suite 1D is open. It's yours. You and your son will have plenty of room to sleep." I can't afford an upgrade," the woman stammered. "It's on the house," Vivian said. She turned to Leo. "Escort this guest to Suite 1D. Champagne for her, juice for the boy, and get someone to take her bags." "But Dr. Clark," Leo whispered. "Where will you go?" Vivian picked up her briefcase. "I'll take 34B. I need to be reminded of what the experience is like for the majority of our customers anyway. It's been a while since I did a true audit." As the pregnant woman burst into tears of gratitude, Vivian Clark, CEO of Meridian Airways, walked to the back of the plane, squeezed into a middle seat in economy, and buckled her belt. She didn't care about the legroom. She had already won the only space that mattered. Robert St. John was a man who believed the world was a machine, and money was the grease. If something squeaked, you didn't fix the part. You just poured more grease on it until the noise stopped. He was currently at a charity auction in Manhattan, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than a Honda Civic, holding a paddle he intended to use to buy a vintage motorcycle he didn't know how to ride. He was feeling good. St. John Logistics had just posted a record quarter, largely due to the massive contract renewal pending with Meridian Airways. His phone buzzed in his inner pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Irritated, he stepped away from the bar, moving to a quiet corner of the ballroom. He checked the screen. Unknown number. "This is Robert," he answered crisply. "Mr. St. John? This is Sergeant Miller with the Port Authority Police at JFK." Robert frowned. "Police? Is this a donation call? Because I already bought a table at the policeman's ball." "No, sir. We have your wife, Meredith St. John, in custody." The noise of the party seemed to drop away. "Custody? What are you talking about? She's on a flight to London." "She was on a flight to London, sir. She was removed from the aircraft approximately 40 minutes ago. She is currently being processed for assault, disorderly conduct, and interference with a flight crew. She's requesting legal counsel." Robert felt a vein in his temple throb. Meredith. Again. This wasn't the first time. There was the incident with the valet in Miami, and the time she threw a salad at a waiter in the Hamptons. But arrested? "Let me talk to her," Robert commanded. "She's in a holding cell, sir, but she's shouting quite loudly for you." There was a rustle, and then Meredith's voice came on the line, distorted by panic and bad reception. Robert, you have to get me out. It's a nightmare. It smells like urine in here. They handcuffed me like a criminal." "Meredith, shut up and listen," Robert hissed. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything. It was this woman. She stole our seat. 1A, you know that's our seat. I told her to move, and she got aggressive, and maybe some champagne spilled, and then she turned the captain against me." "You got arrested over a seat dispute?" Robert rubbed his eyes. "Meredith, tell me you didn't drop my name." "Of course I did. I told them you know the CEO. I told them we're VIPs. But they didn't care. This woman, Robert, she's psychotic. She claimed she was the CEO." Robert froze. His hand tightened on the phone. "Say that again," Robert said slowly. "She claimed she was the CEO. She had some fake badge. A black woman, messy hair, cheap sweater. V. Clark or something. She said she was cancelling your contract. You need to call the real CEO right now and have her fired and get me out of here." Robert felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold in the heated ballroom. V. Clark. He knew the name of the CEO of Meridian Airways. He had never met her in person. Dealings were always done through VPs and lawyers, but he knew the name on the contracts. Dr. Vivian Clark. He also knew that Dr. Clark was famously private, famously hands-on, and yes, a black woman. "Meredith," Robert whispered. Did you call her anything? Did you use any words?" "I just put her in her place," Meredith cried defensively. "I told her to go back to the service entrance. I might have called her a diversity hire, but she provoked me." Robert hung up the phone. He didn't say goodbye. He just ended the call. He stood there, staring at the marble floor. The grease wasn't going to work this time. The machine wasn't just squeaking. The gears were grinding themselves into dust. He needed damage control. Immediate, nuclear-level damage control. He dialed his lawyer, Jonathan. "John, wake up. We have a crisis. Meredith just assaulted Vivian Clark." "The CEO of Meridian?" Jonathan's voice was groggy, then instantly sharp. "Please tell me you're joking." "On a plane, in front of witnesses, she was arrested, and apparently she dropped racial slurs while doing it." "Robert, The Meridian contract is up for renewal next Tuesday. It's 40% of your operating revenue." "I know," Robert snapped. "Fix it. Get down to JFK. Bribe the cops. Threaten the airline. I don't care. Just get the story killed before it hits the news." "Robert," Jonathan said, his voice grave. "If this happened at JFK an hour ago, have you checked Twitter?" Robert lowered the phone and opened the X app, Twitter. He didn't have to search. It was trending. Meridian Airways, Jashu Karen on a plane, Siov's Karen. He clicked the top video. It had 2.4 million views already. The shaky video showed Meredith standing over a seated Vivian. The audio was crisp. "Service entrance is in the back, honey. Don't touch anything on your way out." Then the splash of liquid. Then the calm, terrifying voice of Vivienne Clark. "I built this airline." Robert watched the video loop. He watched his wife destroy his empire in 45 seconds of bigotry. He needed to get to the airport, but not to save Meredith. He needed to save himself. He ran out of the ballroom, ignoring the valet, and hailed a cab. "JFK, Terminal 4, drive like hell." By the time Robert arrived at JFK, the atmosphere was chaotic. News vans were already setting up outside Terminal 4. The story was too good to pass up. Billionaire CEO assaulted by socialite wife of logistics tycoon. It had class warfare, race, justice, and airplanes. It was media catnip. Robert fought his way through the press, keeping his head down, and made it to the Port Authority precinct. He found Jonathan, his lawyer, arguing with a desk sergeant. "I'm telling you, my client needs to see his wife. And I'm telling you, counselor, she is being processed, and she is currently screaming at the booking officer, which is adding charges to her sheet," the sergeant replied, looking bored. Robert grabbed Jonathan's shoulder. "Forget Meredith. Where is Clark?" "Clark?" Jonathan looked confused. "She's in the air. Flight 909 took off 20 minutes ago." "Damn it!" Robert slammed his hand on the counter. "I need to talk to her. I need to apologize. I need to explain that Meredith has mental health issues, that this doesn't reflect St. John Logistics." "Robert," Jonathan said quietly, pulling him aside. "I just got an email from Meridian's legal department." "Already?" Jonathan held up his iPad. "It's a notice of breach. They are invoking the morality and reputational harm clause in our vendor agreement. They are suspending all shipments effective immediately pending an internal review. They are also freezing the accounts payable. They owe us $12 million for last month's shipping, Robert. They aren't paying it." Robert felt his knees go weak. He sat down on a hard plastic bench. "They can't do that. We have a contract. The contract says that if a principal of the vendor, that's you or your spouse, engages in conduct that brings disrepute to Meridian, they can terminate for cause. Meredith just became the face of racism for the week. They are within their rights." $12 million, Robert muttered. "If they don't pay that, we miss payroll next week. The trucks stop moving. The drivers walk. We're dead." "There's more," Jonathan said, wincing. "The video. The internet sleuths found out who Meredith is. They found her Instagram. They found your company page. The review bombing started 10 minutes ago. Our Google rating dropped from 4.5 to 1.2. Major clients are tagging us, asking if we support discrimination." Robert stared at the fluorescent lights of the police station. The buzzing was back in his ears. Just then, a door opened. Meredith was led out, still in handcuffs, looking like a drowned rat. Her mascara was smeared down to her chin. She saw Robert and her face lit up with a pathetic hope. "Robert, tell them. Tell them who we are." Robert stood up. He looked at his wife. He looked at the woman who had sat in luxury for 20 years on the back of his work, who had treated the world like her personal servant. "I know who you are," Robert said, his voice cold. "You're the woman who just bankrupted me." "What?" Meredith blinked. "Baby, don't be dramatic. It's just a seat." "It was the CEO, Meredith," Robert screamed, his composure finally shattering. The police station went silent. "You threw champagne on the woman who pays our mortgage. You insulted the woman who holds my company's life in her hands. We are finished. St. John Logistics is finished." Meredith recoiled as if slapped. But I didn't know." "You never know," Robert yelled. "You never look. You just take." "Well, there's nothing left to take. I'm not posting your bail." Meredith's jaw dropped. "What? You heard me. Jonathan, let's go." "Robert!" Meredith shrieked as the officers took her arm to lead her back to the cell. "You can't leave me here. It's cold. Robert!" Robert turned his back on her. He walked out into the cool night air of JFK, the flashes of paparazzi cameras blinding him. He knew it was too late. The karma wasn't just hitting Meredith. It was hitting him for enabling her for decades. He had created a monster, and the monster had finally eaten him. The dawn light over the Atlantic began to bleed into the cabin of Flight 909, painting the interior in soft hues of violet and gold. 7 hours had passed since the incident at the gate, 7 hours that had fundamentally shifted the trajectory of several lives. In Suite 1D, the sanctuary that had been the center of so much contention, Sarah stirred from the deepest sleep she had experienced in months. The lie-flat bed, upholstered in hand-stitched Italian leather, felt less like an airplane seat and more like a cloud suspended in the stratosphere. For the first time in her pregnancy, her back didn't ache. The anxiety about the future, about affording a stroller, about the sheer weight of bringing a life into a world where she struggled to pay rent, it had all momentarily vanished in the silence of the cabin. A soft chime signaled the beginning of the breakfast service. Elena, the senior purser, appeared almost instantly, sliding the privacy partition open with a gentle smile. She held a silver tray bearing a hot towel, fresh fruit, and a glass of squeezed orange juice. "Good morning, Sarah," Elena whispered, her voice warm. "We'll be beginning our initial descent into London Heathrow in about 40 minutes. I hope you rested well." "I did," Sarah whispered back, rubbing her eyes, half afraid that if she spoke too loudly, the dream would shatter, and she'd be back in the cramped middle seat of row 42. "Thank you. This has been... I don't even have the words." Elena set the tray down and reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with the gold Meridian Airways logo. "Dr. Clark asked me to give you this before we landed," Elena said. Sarah took the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a note written on heavy cardstock in elegant, sweeping cursive. "Sarah, every child deserves to start their journey with dignity and comfort. Please accept this gift not as charity, but as an investment in the future passenger you are carrying. I have instructed my team to grant you and your child lifetime gold status on Meridian. Welcome to the family. V." Sarah pressed the note to her chest, the paper cool against her skin. Tears pricked her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. It wasn't just about the miles or the lounge access. It was the validation. For a woman who had spent so long feeling invisible, feeling like a burden to be shuffled past, this was a declaration that she mattered. Meanwhile, far back in the cabin, in the cramped reality of row 34, Dr. Vivian Clark was waking up to a very different morning. Her neck was stiff, locked at an awkward angle against the thin pillow she had wedged against the window. Her legs were cramped from the limited pitch of the seat. To her left, the gentleman in 34A was still snoring with the rhythmic intensity of a chainsaw. To her right, the young toddler in 34C, a boy named Leo, had managed to knock his sippy cup onto her lap while he slept, leaving a sticky patch of apple juice on her leggings. Vivian stretched, wincing as her spine popped, and smiled. She loved it. For years, Vivian had floated above the world in boardrooms, private jets, and the sanitized silence of VIP suites. She had forgotten the texture of the product she was selling. She had forgotten the collective humanity of 300 strangers hurtling through the sky in a metal tube, listening to the hum of the conversation around her, seeing the exhausted mother across the aisle trying to mix formula, watching the student 2 rows up frantically highlighting a textbook. This was the heartbeat of her company. It was grounding. It was real. She grabbed a napkin and dabbed at the apple juice on her knee. The mother of the boy woke up, saw the mess, and gasped. "Oh my God, I am so sorry." The mother panicked, reaching for wipes. "Leo is a nightmare. I'm so sorry. Your pants?" "It's fine," Vivian said, waving her hand with a genuine laugh. "Trust me, I've had worse things thrown at me in the last 12 hours than apple juice. He's a sweet kid." The overhead chime dinged. The seatbelt sign flashed on. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Anderson speaking from the flight deck." The deep baritone voice echoed through the cabin. "We have begun our descent into London Heathrow. The weather is a brisk 50 degrees with light rain." There was a pause on the intercom. Usually, this was where the pilot would sign off, but the line remained open, a static hiss filling the cabin. "Before we land," Captain Anderson continued, his voice thickening with emotion, "I want to break protocol for a moment. We talk a lot about service in this industry. But true service isn't about what you bring to a seat. It's about who you are as a person. Today, we have the honor of flying with our CEO, Dr. Vivian Clark. She is currently seated in economy, row 34, because she gave up her first-class suite to a passenger who needed it more. Thank you, boss, for reminding us that leadership isn't about being at the front. It's about taking care of the people in the back." For a second, there was silence. Then a ripple started. It began in the back rows, a few claps. Then it surged forward. Within seconds, the entire economy cabin had erupted into applause. People stood up, craning their necks to see over the seatbacks. "That's her," someone whispered. "The lady with the messy bun." She gave up the suite? For real? Vivian felt her face heat up. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, the raw, unpolished adulation of regular people. She gave a small, awkward wave, her cheeks flushing. The pregnant woman, Sarah, had turned around from the curtain of first class, beaming through her tears. It was a moment of perfect unified connection. When the plane finally taxied to the gate and the seatbelt sign extinguished, Vivian waited. She let everyone else deplane first. She helped the mother in 34C get her bags down from the overhead bin. She thanked the cleaning crew who were waiting on the jet bridge. When she finally stepped into the terminal, the bubble of the flight burst. The real world was waiting, and it was loud. Arthur, her chief of staff, was waiting at the gate with a team of 4 security guards and 2 legal aides. He looked pale, his British stiff upper lip trembling slightly. "Dr. Clark," Arthur said, rushing forward to take her battered briefcase. "Thank God. The arrivals hall is a zoo. The press is swarming every exit. The video of the incident has hit 15 million views. The real CEO is the #1 trending topic globally." Vivian adjusted her glasses, her demeanor shifting instantly from tired traveler to shark-like executive. "I don't care about the hashtags, Arthur. What is the status of the St. John contract?" Arthur fell into step beside her as they walked briskly toward a private VIP exit. He opened a leather folder. Legal has drafted the termination letter. We are invoking Clause 14b, the gross reputational harm provision. However, Robert St. John has been calling the office every 5 minutes for the last 4 hours. He's desperate. He says suspending the contract will bankrupt him within the month. Vivian stopped walking. The bustle of the terminal flowed around her like a river around a stone. St. John Logistics handles 40% of our cargo, Vivian said, her voice cool and analytical. But they are replaceable. Dignity is not. If we continue to do business with a man who enables that kind of bigotry, we are complicit. Execute the termination, Arthur. Immediate effect. Understood, Arthur said, making a note. And the wife? Meredith? Vivian's eyes hardened. Place her on the global exclusion list. I want her banned from Meridian, and I want that ban shared with our Sky Team partners and One World Alliance members. If she wants to cross the Atlantic again, she can take a container ship. The karma that came for the St. John's wasn't a gentle correction. It was a dismantling. Robert returned to New York to find his empire dissolving like sugar in hot water. The news that Meridian Airways, the whale client that justified his company's massive leverage, had fired him for cause spread through Wall Street by noon. The banks didn't wait for explanations. They saw the viral video, they saw the contract termination, and they saw a liability. By Tuesday, the lines of credit were frozen. By Wednesday, the fleet fuel cards were declined. Robert sat in his corner office, overlooking a rainy Manhattan skyline, listening to the silence of a company that had stopped moving. His phone rang. It wasn't a client. It was his bankruptcy attorney. "It's over, Robert," the lawyer said. "With the accounts payable frozen by Meridian, we can't make payroll on Friday. The drivers are already walking off the job. You need to file for Chapter 11 immediately to protect personal assets." "My personal assets are already gone," Robert whispered, staring at the photo of himself and Meredith on his desk. He picked up the frame and threw it into the trash can. The glass shattered with a satisfying crash. He didn't go home to comfort his wife. He went to a hotel. And then he went to war. The divorce proceedings were brutal and public. Robert sued Meredith not just for separation, but for damages. He argued that her conduct was a breach of their marital fiduciary duty, a legal Hail Mary that rarely worked, but in the court of public opinion, he won. He left her with nothing. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad, and Justice Halloway, the presiding judge, had little sympathy for a woman whose arrogance had destroyed 1,000 jobs. "Mrs. St. John," the judge said during the final hearing, peering over her spectacles, "you seem to believe that the world owes you a certain standard of living. Let this judgment serve as a reminder. Status is a rental, not a possession, and your lease has expired." 6 months later, the transformation was complete. The penthouse was sold. The galas were a memory. Meredith St. John, once the queen of the charity circuit, stood on a cracked sidewalk in Queens, New York. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked through the thin fabric of her generic beige raincoat. She wasn't waiting for a limousine. She was standing at a bus stop, clutching a reusable grocery bag that contained her laundry. Her luxury SUV had been repossessed months ago. Her friends had ghosted her the moment the credit card stopped working. She looked tired. The Botox had worn off, revealing deep lines of bitterness around her mouth. She checked her watch, a cheap plastic digital piece that replaced her Rolex. The Q10 bus was late. As she shivered, a bus finally pulled up. But it wasn't hers. It was a city bus wrapped in a massive, colorful advertisement. Meredith looked up, and her breath hitched in her throat. The entire side of the bus was covered in a sleek ad for Meridian Airways. The image was powerful. A diverse group of pilots, baggage handlers and flight attendants standing shoulder to shoulder. And right in the center, sitting in an economy seat, but looking more regal than any queen, was Dr. Vivian Clark. The slogan was printed in bold white letters that seemed to glow in the gloom of the rainy afternoon. Meridian Airways. Built for everyone. Because respect is the only upgrade that matters. Meredith stared at the image of the woman she had tried to banish to the service entrance. Now, that woman's face was being driven through the streets of the city Meredith used to think she owned. The doors of the bus hissed open. The driver, a weary man who had no time for drama, looked down at her. "You getting on, lady?" Meredith looked at the bus, then back at the ad. The shame was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. She lowered her head, clutching her laundry bag tighter. "Yes," she whispered, stepping up into the crowded, noisy bus. "I'm getting on." Thousands of miles away, cruising at 38,000 feet toward Tokyo, Flight 909 was smooth and quiet. In Suite 1A, the owner's loft, a 10-year-old girl was sitting cross-legged on the ottoman. She was black, with hair braided in intricate beads that clicked softly as she moved. She was looking out the window at the endless carpet of stars, her eyes wide with wonder. She turned to the flight attendant. "Is it true?" the girl asked. "Did a lady really build this whole plane?" The flight attendant smiled. "She sure did. And she built it so girls like you would always have a seat at the front." The girl turned back to the window, watching the world pass beneath her, dreaming of the day she would learn to fly. And that, more than the stock price or the viral fame, was exactly the legacy Dr. Vivian Clark had intended. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how one woman's entitlement crashed into another woman's hard-earned legacy. It's a powerful reminder that money might buy you a first-class seat, but it cannot buy you class. Meredith St. John learned the hard way that in the real world you cannot judge someone's power by their hoodie, and you certainly shouldn't mistreat people just because you think they are staff. Treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, because you never know. They might be the same person. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served, please smash that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be kind today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.